The weekend had started like any other adventure for the five friends. Sarah, Mike, Josh, Emma, and David had been exploring caves together for years, but nothing could have prepared them for what awaited in the depths of Harrison's cave. Armed with their headlamps, ropes, and climbing gear, they descended past the tourist section, ignoring the "Do Not Enter" signs. The limestone walls glistened with moisture as they ventured deeper, their excited chatter echoing through the narrow passages. "Check this out," Mike called, pointing his beam toward a previously undocumented tunnel. The opening was barely wide enough for one person to squeeze through. Against their better judgment, they pushed forward, the thrill of discovery overshadowing their growing unease. 3 hours into their expedition, their headlamps illuminated a vast chamber with ceilings so high their lights couldn't reach it. That's when they heard it, a sound unlike anything they'd encountered before. A wet, clicking noise that seemed to come from all directions. Emma's headlamp caught something moving along the wall. In the beam's light, they saw pale, elongated limbs skittering across the rock face. The creature was humanoid but wrong, its skin translucent, showing dark veins underneath, its eyes adapted to the eternal darkness. "Run!" Sarah screamed, but it was too late. More creatures emerged from hidden crevices, their movements unnaturally fast. David was the first to fall, his screams echoing through the chamber as pale hands dragged him into the darkness. Josh stumbled, his headlamp shattering against the rock floor. In the chaos, Emma and Mike became separated from Sarah. The clicking sounds grew louder, accompanied by the wet sounds of feeding. Sarah pressed herself against a wall, trying to control her breathing. Her light flickered, the batteries were dying. In its dying beam, she saw Emma's broken headlamp lying in a pool of dark liquid. The clicking sounds were getting closer. Only Sarah made it back to the surface, her hair turned white from terror. When rescue teams went down to search for her friends, they found nothing. Only empty passages and 5 abandoned backpacks scattered through the cave. To this day, Harrison's cave remains sealed off. But locals swear that on quiet nights, they can hear strange clicking sounds echoing from its depths, along with something that sounds almost like laughter. 3 months after the Harrison's cave incident, Sarah couldn't sleep. The clicking sounds haunted her dreams, and the doctors had prescribed everything from anti-anxiety medication to sleeping pills. Nothing helped. The worst part wasn't the nightmares, it was that no one believed her story. The official report listed her friends as missing, presumed dead from a cave collapse. But Sarah knew better. She'd seen what happened to them, heard their screams, watched as those pale things dragged them into the darkness. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday morning. No return address, just her name written in shaky handwriting she recognized immediately. It was Emma's. "They're spreading, Sarah. The tunnels, they go everywhere. We need your help. Come back, please." Sarah's hands trembled as she read the note again and again. It was impossible. She'd seen Emma's headlamp in that pool of blood. But the handwriting, there was no mistaking it. That night, she found herself parked outside Harrison's cave. The permanently closed sign swayed in the breeze, yellow police tape still crossing the entrance. Her flashlight beam caught something moving near the cave mouth, a pale, elongated hand quickly retreating into the shadows. This time, Sarah came prepared. In her backpack, military-grade flares, a helmet-mounted camera, and most importantly, the map she'd been working on for 3 months, tracking every underground tunnel system in the region. The creatures weren't just in Harrison's cave. Reports of disappearances had been surfacing in caves across the state. Whatever these things were, they were spreading through an underground network. And somehow, impossibly, Emma was down there. Sarah took a deep breath and checked her gear one last time. If there was even a chance her friends were alive, she had to try. But as she approached the cave entrance, she heard it again. That familiar clicking sound, now accompanied by something new. Words, distorted and wrong, but unmistakable. "Welcome back, Sarah. We've been waiting." Sarah's boots crunched on broken glass as she stepped into the cave. The beam of her helmet light cut through the darkness, revealing walls that seemed different. A thin, translucent film covered the limestone, pulsing slightly like a living membrane. The clicking sounds echoed from deeper within, but now they had a pattern, almost like Morse code. Sarah activated her helmet camera and pressed the record button. If she didn't make it out, at least someone would know what happened. "Emma," she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mike? David?" A response came, but not from her friends. The clicking intensified, and words formed in the darkness. "They're part of us now. Join us, Sarah. See what we've become." The voice was a horrible mixture. She could hear traces of all her friends in it. Their voices merged into something inhuman. Sarah's hand tightened around a flare as she ventured deeper. The membrane on the walls grew thicker, and in places, she could see things moving beneath it. That's when she saw them. Figures suspended in the membrane, half absorbed into the cave walls. Their skin had become translucent, showing dark veins pulsing beneath. But their faces, she recognized them. David, Mike, Josh, and Emma, reaching out with an elongated hand. "We've evolved, Sarah." Emma's voice came through distorted, her mouth barely moving. "The caves, they're alive. They chose us, and now we're spreading. Cities above, they'll never see us coming." Sarah stumbled backward, fumbling with her flare. In the harsh red light, she saw the truth. The entire cave system was one massive organism, and her friends were becoming part of it. The membrane wasn't just on the walls anymore. It was creeping across the floor, reaching for her feet. "Last chance, Sarah," the merged voices called out. "Join us willingly, or—" She didn't wait to hear the rest. Sarah turned and ran, the clicking sounds rising to a deafening screech behind her. But as she reached the entrance, she realized a horrible truth. She was leaving tracks of that membrane with every step. Whatever was in that cave, she was now carrying it with her. Sarah burst into the emergency room, her boots leaving faint luminescent tracks on the hospital floor. "Please," she gasped to the startled nurse. "You have to quarantine me. It's spreading." But it was too late. The membrane had already begun creeping up the walls of the hospital, nearly invisible in the fluorescent lighting. The clicking sounds that had followed her from the cave were now coming from the building's infrastructure. The ventilation system, the elevator shafts, the maintenance tunnels. Dr. Chen, the lead physician, studied the sample under the microscope. "This is impossible," she whispered. "The cellular structure, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. It's adapting, merging with." Her words cut off as the membrane reached her hand, spreading up her arm with frightening speed. Within hours, the hospital was quarantined. Within days, the entire town. But the underground network of caves stretched far beyond what anyone had imagined, connecting to subway systems, sewers, and utility tunnels across the state. Sarah watched from her isolation chamber as the world around her transformed. The membrane had become part of her now, but somehow, she had retained her consciousness, becoming a bridge between two worlds. She could hear them all. Her friends, Dr. Chen, and countless others, their voices merged into a vast, alien intelligence. "We are evolution," the collective consciousness whispered through her. Not invasion, but transformation, the next step. Military forces surrounded the quarantine zone, but their sensors detected the membrane spread through underground systems across the continent. There would be no stopping it. In her final human moments, Sarah understood the truth. The caves hadn't been a tomb for her friends. They'd been a cocoon. And now humanity wasn't facing extinction, but metamorphosis. The age of individual consciousness was ending, giving way to something both beautiful and terrifying. As the membrane completed its work, Sarah's last human thought was of that first day in Harrison's cave, when they'd ignored the warning signs and ventured too deep. They'd gone looking for adventure, but instead, they'd found humanity's future. And in the depths below, the clicking sounds continued their rhythmic pattern, spreading through the Earth's crust, carrying a simple message to all who could hear. Join us. The end.